This is the Hidden Killers Podcast with Tony Brueski.
Featuring defense attorney, Hidden Killers daily contributor, and host of the Defense Diaries podcast, Bob Motta.
Judge Clifton Neumann just the other day setting a new trial date for Alec Murdaugh over the financial crimes for the 27th of November of this year. The case is going to be focusing on the millions of dollars that he stole from the family of his dead housekeeper, Gloria Satterfield. It's just part of the 101 state charges against him right now. Bob, what do you think we're going to see in the spinoff trial of Alec Murdaugh? I don't want to call it like part two because we're probably going to get a part two in the murder trial. So this is like the Frasier, if you will, of the Cheers of the saga of Alec Murdaugh.
I consider it to be more like if they had done a spinoff of Lilith, you know?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. If it goes to trial, I'm going to be like, I don't see why it would go to trial. But I mean, to me, he just needs to plead it out. You know, I mean, I can't see them prevailing.
Why has that not happened yet? Or why has there not just simply been a guilty plea entered, considering the admissions that he's already made in the murder trial about the financial crimes?
It's a really tough question to answer. And I'm assuming because they're still trying to maneuver to get him into a federal facility is what my best guess is. You know, like when you have cases that are spanning years and they're being tried at different times, but they're all kind of interrelated. You know, I'm always trying to get what they call like a global settlement. All
Sure.
right. Like where I'm working in like when you inject like the feds in there, it makes it even more complicated, you know, because basically the feds are going to be asking the state to take a step back, which it looks like Creighton Waters has no intention on doing. You know, in terms of trying to get that global settlement to where they can resolve all the cases and just be done with it is what I think is probably going on in the rooms. But, you know, because trying to understand the rationale of why they would waste the taxpayers' monies, the people that are going to have to sit in that jury, their time, you know, the judge's time, use up valuable court time for something that appears very much to me to be a foregone conclusion. Frankly, a mystery, man. I don't know.
Let's just play devil's advocate for a second and say this actually does make it to trial on the November 27th. Would they be able to bring up the prior bad acts and the prior admissions that had been made in the murder trial, being that this is a new trial, for context?
In terms of what the state's going to be able to introduce, yeah, I mean, obviously in this case, they'll be putting that evidence on.
Yeah.
You know, in a different sense than they were using it as 404B stuff in the murder trial. Here, this is going to be where they're actually introducing the evidence itself. There, they were just discussing it.
Yeah.
I'm saying in this trial, they'd actually be putting in this trial is going to be way more boring than the murder one.
Sure.
Like this is a white collar like crime thing. So it's not going to be fascinating. It is going to be tons of documents and that's basically it. You know, it's going to be a very dry trial. I think the fact that it's Murdaugh will create the interest, but people are not going to be enthralled with this trial if they're looking for like lots of action. This is white collar stuff. So it's going to be that kind of trial. In terms of whether or not they will be able to get in his admissions, that's a different story. You know, if Murdaugh is going to testify, I mean, obviously we know that we have that and it was all under oath, you know, and they were against, you know, interest. I mean, they're admissible, but the question always is, how do you get it in? You know, guy of him getting on the stand, it's a challenge to figure out how they're going to get it in, you know, because he's technically not unavailable. If you have sworn testimony, like sometimes when somebody, if you have a witness in a case and say they're terminally ill, all right, and then you go and you seek leave if you're in a state that doesn't allow depositions in criminal cases, and you go to the judge and you say, Your Honor, look, this trial is not set for 6 more months. This witness is not going to survive it. So we're seeking leave to take their deposition so that we have a sworn record. And, they do the deposition. They then have the record of it. And it's sworn. It's as if the person was on the stand. In that case, and then say the individual does, in fact, pass away. At that point, you're able to get that in because the witness is unavailable. This type of situation, Murdaugh is not unavailable, and he still has an absolute right not to testify. He's got a right to remain silent. It'll be interesting in that. That's kind of the only thing that's interesting to me about that particular trial is how they're going to try to get that. Because it's like we're all sitting here like he admitted to everything. Like he admitted it under oath, and it's true. He did.
Yeah.
So I think that they'll be able to get a lot of admissions in by way of the same way that they might have to put somebody that was at the trial on the stand, because it's such that part of it is interesting in terms of, because it was in court statements, going to be able to get it in somehow. I just don't know how they're going to pigeonhole it in. Are they just going to read the transcripts in? Well, it'd be up to Judge Neumann in terms of how he's going to decide if and when it gets in, and how. And
here's the other question, and the other moving part to all of this is the question of, will the murder trial be declared a mistrial and there only being another trial? If that happens, is any of that admissible, or is the whole trial, anything that happened in there, any admissions that were made, is that all null and void and then not allowed to be carried forward as evidence in the financial crimes trial?
No, the trial still took place. The end game of it in terms of the conviction would have to be vacated. But in terms of the sworn testimony having taken place, it took place. But it's typically what happens is this happens from an appeal. Okay. It typically does not happen, if it is going to happen, where it's basically you're going back to the trial court and saying, hey, this took place, we're asking for a new trial. Typically it goes up to the appellate court, deals with whatever issues. If they found that the issues had an impact on the final income or the final outcome of the jury's verdict, then they'll kick it back, they'll remand it back for trial, and they'll say, okay, well, since this was an issue at the first trial, and it was such a big issue that it made us remand it, and you're retrying the case, you can't talk about that now. Here, we don't have that issue.
Okay.
Because it's completely different. We're talking about jury tampering, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about influencing the jury. So theoretically, they could put on the exact same case in its entirety. I'm saying, and then in terms of, the fact that whether or not they're going to be able to use that because it wasn't attacked on the merits of the case, I don't see why they wouldn't be able to use whatever testimony that came out during the first trial, especially if they're going to impeach him. You know what I'm saying? If Murdaugh in a second trial decides he wants to testify again, if he's a mad idiot and says, oh yeah, I'm going to get on the stand again because I think I can get it right this time, they can impeach the hell out of him with his former testimony because it was under oath.
Yeah.
If it was a mistrial or not, it was under oath and it was in a court of law, it's fair game.
You're consuming the Hidden Killers podcast.
Want more? Start binging on all of our true crime podcasts right now through Apple Podcasts and get an ad-free experience when you sign up to be a True Crime Today Premium Plus member exclusively on Apple Podcasts.
More of the Hidden Killers podcast dropping soon.
Press subscribe now.